At the estate meeting, my daughter-in-law stood up and said to the room, "The lake house, the investments, the business, those are ours. Gerald can keep his fishing rods." Everyone laughed, until the estate attorney cleared his throat and said, "Actually, I need to stop you there." I couldn't stop smiling. My wife, Loretta, passed on a Tuesday in March. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. That's how fast it goes. One day, she was complaining about a backache, and 11 weeks later I was standing in a funeral home in my one good suit, picking out a casket while my son Marcus stood next to me checking his phone. We were married 31 years. I want you to understand that number before anything else. 31 years. We built everything together, slowly, the way people used to, saving before spending, talking things over at the kitchen table, disagreeing, and then working through it. Loretta was a woman who believed in doing things right. She was also, if I'm being honest, a woman who worked harder than me for most of those years. I'm not ashamed to say that. She had the sharper business mind. She launched a medical billing consultancy out of our spare bedroom in 2003, and by 2015, it employed 14 people and served clinics across 3 states. I handled the house, ran the kids to school, later worked part-time doing bookkeeping for a few small businesses. It wasn't glamorous. Some years were tighter than others. But we had an agreement, a real one, talked about out loud, written into our estate plan. And I never once questioned my role in it. My son Marcus is 42. He married a woman named Serena about 6 years ago. I want to be fair here. Serena is intelligent, organized, and completely certain that she is always the smartest person in any room she enters. She had an opinion about everything from the day Marcus brought her home, where we should vacation, why Loretta's business model was outdated, why our house, a 4-bedroom colonial on Lake Crestfield in upstate New York, was wasted on 2 people. Loretta used to squeeze my hand under the dinner table when Serena got going. Just a small squeeze. It meant, I know, just let it go. I let a lot of things go for a long time. The first Thanksgiving after they got married, Serena pulled me aside in the kitchen while Loretta was taking a nap. She'd been going through a round of chemo, not the pancreatic cancer. That came later. This was a bout with breast cancer she beat in 2019. Serena stood there by the refrigerator with a glass of wine and said, "You know, Gerald, Marcus and I have been talking. When the time comes, and I don't mean soon, I just mean eventually, it would make more sense for us to take over the business. We have the energy for it. You'd probably want to just rest." I was 63 years old. I was not looking for permission to rest. I didn't say that. I said something like, "That's a conversation for another time," and I went back to peeling potatoes. After that, it became a pattern. Serena asking questions about the business finances at family dinners. Serena forwarding Marcus articles about family business succession. Serena mentioning at least twice that the lake house would be a wonderful place to raise grandchildren. Her way of suggesting they should have it. My daughter Pauline, who lives in Denver with her husband and keeps a respectful distance from family drama, told me once over the phone, "Dad, she's already decorating our inheritance." I told Pauline she was being too hard on Serena. I actually believed that. I wanted to believe that. The year Loretta was diagnosed, Serena went quiet for a while. I'll give her that. There were no pointed comments at the dinner table, no questions about asset transfers. She brought food over twice. She was genuinely pleasant at the hospital visits. But about 2 weeks before Loretta passed, when it became clear that the end was near, Serena started spending more time at our house. She said she was there to help. Mostly, she walked around looking at things. I noticed her pausing in doorways, looking at the bookshelves, the furniture, the windows facing the lake. She was measuring the place with her eyes. I didn't say anything. Loretta was in the hospital bed. We'd moved into the sunroom because she'd always loved the light in there, and she needed me present, fully present, for whatever time was left. I couldn't spend that time managing Serena's appetites. Loretta died on a Tuesday morning with the sun coming through the windows and my hand in hers. Pauline had flown in the night before and was there. Marcus was there. Serena sat in the corner. The last thing Loretta said to me, this was the evening before, her voice very soft, was, "You know what to do. You always did." I thought she meant about grief, about moving forward, about being okay. I understood later that she meant something much more specific. The estate meeting was scheduled for 6 weeks after the funeral. Our attorney, a careful man named Mr. Ostrowski, who'd handled our affairs for nearly 20 years, requested that all parties be present. Marcus and Serena drove up from the city. Pauline flew in from Denver. We gathered in Mr. Ostrowski's conference room on a Wednesday afternoon. Gray carpet, long table, a pitcher of water nobody touched. I want to be honest about how I walked in there. I walked in grief-worn and tired and not particularly interested in fighting anyone over anything. 31 years of marriage had just ended. I was 68 years old and I had been sleeping on Loretta's side of the bed because mine felt too far away. I was not at my sharpest. Serena, however, walked in like she had an agenda. She dressed the way people dress when they want to seem authoritative. Blazer, structured bag, a legal pad on the table in front of her. Marcus sat beside her looking slightly pale. Pauline sat beside me and said nothing but touched my arm once when we sat down. Mr. Ostrowski had barely opened the folder when Serena leaned forward. "Before we go through all of this," she said, gesturing at the documents, "I just want to clarify something. Marcus and I have already spoken with our own attorney, and we believe the most efficient approach, out of respect for everyone's time, is for Marcus to assume management of the business immediately, and for the lake house to transfer to us as primary residents. Gerald," she actually used my first name with a slight pause before it, like a teacher addressing a slow student. "Gerald would retain a portion of the liquid assets naturally, enough to be comfortable. And we'd of course make arrangements for him to visit the lake house, holidays and so on." She said, "Visit." She said, "Visit." I looked at Mr. Ostrowski. He had not moved. His expression was the professional blankness of a man who has seen this exact scene many times before and has learned not to react to it. "I'll take over the business operations," Serena continued. And here she glanced across at Pauline. "Since Marcus has the strongest relationship with the key clients. Pauline, obviously your portion is addressed in the will. We're not disputing that." The room was quiet for a moment. Marcus, to his credit, looked like a man who wanted to be somewhere else. He cleared his throat and said, "What Serena means is, I think I explained it clearly," Serena said. I watched Pauline's jaw tighten. She has her mother's ability to hold anger very still. I put my hand flat on the table, not dramatically, just set it down. Old habit when I want to think clearly. Mr. Ostrowski looked at me. I gave him a small nod. He picked up the first document. "I appreciate everyone's thoughts," he said, in the tone of a man who does not appreciate them at all. "But let's proceed with what's actually in front of us." He read through the opening provisions. Loretta's personal effects, her jewelry, the car. Standard. Serena uncapped her pen. Then Mr. Ostrowski turned to a section marked with a red tab and he paused. "I want to address the business and property before we go further," he said, "because there's a structural matter that supersedes the will's distribution." Serena tilted her head. "The Lake Crestfield property," Mr. Ostrowski said, "was purchased in 1998 under joint tenancy with right of survivorship. What that means is that the property does not pass through the will at all. Upon Loretta's death, full ownership transferred automatically and immediately to Gerald." Serena's pen stopped moving. "The property is not part of the estate," Mr. Ostrowski said, quietly and clearly. "It cannot be willed to anyone. It belongs to Gerald, entirely and exclusively." The room was very still. "That's," Serena started. "Standard property law," Mr. Ostrowski said. She turned to Marcus. He looked at the table. I watched the pen in her hand. She held it, but wasn't writing anything. Mr. Ostrowski moved to the next red tab. "Regarding the business," he said. Loretta's consultancy was incorporated in 2003. At that time, she structured it specifically as a marital asset held in both names. I drew up those documents myself. Upon her death, Gerald's existing 50% ownership does not change. The business does not transfer through the will. Gerald already owns half. The remaining portion, he turned a page. Loretta has bequeathed in equal shares to both Marcus and Pauline, not to Marcus alone. Another silence. Serena set the pen down. "So Marcus owns 25%, she said. Her voice had changed, gotten smaller. "Correct." "And Gerald owns 50. "Correct." She did the math. I watched her do it. I watched the moment she understood that what she'd walked in here announcing she would take, the business, the house, the control, was never hers to take. Not because the will said so, because it never could have been. Because Loretta had made sure of it 20 years ago, quietly, in conference rooms just like this one. I need a moment, Serena said. She stood up, gathered her legal pad, still blank, and walked out into the hallway. Marcus looked at me for the first time since we'd sat down. There was something in his face I hadn't seen in a while. Something younger. Dad, he said. I'm sorry. Pauline reached over and squeezed my hand. Loretta's gesture. I had to look at the window for a second. We'll talk, I said to Marcus. We've got time. After Serena came back in, Mr. Ostrowski walked through the rest of the will with minimal interruption. Her legal pad stayed closed. She asked 2 questions, both specific and procedural, and otherwise sat very still. Marcus and I stepped outside together when it was over. It was a cool afternoon, early spring, that particular light you get in upstate New York, when the sky is pale blue and everything is still bare, but you can feel something about to change. We stood in the parking lot and he didn't say much at first. He's not good at saying the hard things. Never was. He got that from me, if I'm being honest. Finally, he said, she didn't know any of that. The ownership structure. I didn't either. I know, I said. Did Mom tell you she'd set it up that way? I thought about Loretta's voice the evening before she died. You know what to do. You always did. Not directly, I said, but she made sure I'd be okay. Marcus nodded slowly. He put his hands in his jacket pockets and looked at the parking lot pavement the way men do when they're working through something they don't have words for yet. I let things get out of hand, he said. With how things were. The way Serena talked to you sometimes. I should have. It's done, I said. Dad, I mean it. It's done. We move forward. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I could see he was tired. Not tired the way I was tired, with grief layered into it, but tired of something smaller and more corrosive. I recognized it. You can spend years managing the energy of someone who always needs to win, and it leaves a particular kind of exhaustion. The 25%, he said. The business. I don't know the first thing about running it. Then you'll learn, I said. Or we'll hire someone who does. Pauline knows the operations better than either of you. She helped your mother build the client systems back in 2007. You could ask her. He nodded again. Something in his shoulders came down. Pauline found us in the parking lot a few minutes later, and the 3 of us stood there in the thin spring light. Nobody saying a lot, but it was a different kind of quiet than the one we'd had in that conference room. That one had edges. This one was just us. That was 8 months ago. The lake house still has Loretta's reading chair in the sunroom. I haven't moved it. Some mornings I make coffee and sit across from it and talk to her, tell her what's going on, what I'm thinking about, what I noticed. The light on the water changes every day, and she always loved that about it. She used to say it meant the same place could surprise you forever if you paid attention. The business is being managed by a COO I hired in May. Sharp woman, came with strong references, runs things cleanly. Marcus sits on the board. He's learning. He called me last month to ask my opinion on something, and we talked for 45 minutes, and it felt like a conversation we hadn't been able to have in years. I think Serena's grip on him was tighter than either of us wanted to name while it was happening. I'm not sure where things stand between them. That's not my story to know. Pauline flew in for Thanksgiving. Just the 2 of us at the lake house, which sounds quiet and maybe sad, but wasn't. We made Loretta's green bean casserole from her handwritten recipe card and ate too much, and sat by the fire after. And Pauline told me things about her life I'd been too distracted to ask about in years. Her oldest is learning to play piano. She's thinking about changing careers. She misses her mother every single day. We both do. I'm not a man who believed in dramatic confrontations. I never had the kind of personality that needed to win a room. Loretta used to say I was quietly stubborn, which she meant as a compliment, that I held my ground without making noise about it. I didn't walk into that conference room planning a moment. I didn't know exactly what was in those documents until Mr. Ostrowski started reading. But Loretta knew. She had known for years. She structured everything the way she did not. Out of anger toward Marcus or Serena, not out of spite, but because she understood something I'd only half understood, that the people who love you need to be protected, not from the world, but sometimes from the people closest to them. She'd built a structure that made the quiet, careful thing the right thing, so that no one's worst impulse could undo 31 years of a life built together. She gave me the house and the business and the morning light on the water. I think she also gave me a way to stand in that conference room without raising my voice, without having to say a single word in my own defense, and let the truth do what she'd always trusted it to do. She had a way of doing that. Loretta was, from the beginning to the end, the smartest person I ever knew. I knew that. I just should have said it more often while she was here to hear it. I've thought about that conference room a lot in the months since. The gray carpet, the water pitcher nobody touched, Serena's blank legal pad. What strikes me now isn't the moment Mr. Ostrowski read the property structure aloud, or the way her pen stopped moving. What strikes me is how long everything had already been decided. Quietly, carefully, years before any of us sat down in those chairs. That's the thing about choices. The ones that matter most don't announce themselves. Loretta didn't sit me down one evening and say, "I'm going to make sure no one can take this from you." She just kept making the right, careful decision every time there was one to make. Joint tenancy in 1998, the business structure in 2003, provisions reviewed and updated through the years. Each one a small, quiet act of intelligence and foresight. And each one, it turned out, a form of protection I didn't fully understand I had until I needed it. I think about Serena walking into that room with her legal pad and her blazer and her certainty, and I don't feel much anger anymore. Mostly I feel something closer to recognition, because I've known people like that my whole life, people who confuse loudness with strength, who believe that declaring a thing is the same as earning it. For a long time, I wondered if they were right, if the world really did belong to the ones who spoke first and loudest while the rest of us sat quietly. It doesn't. That's not cynicism or wishful thinking. It's just what I've watched happen, slowly, over decades. The people who actually build things tend to be careful, methodical. They don't need the room to agree with them because they're too busy making sure the work is solid. Loretta built a business that employed 14 people out of a spare bedroom with a second-hand desk and a landline. She didn't need anyone's applause for it. She needed her client calls returned and her invoices paid. Marcus and I have been talking more, real conversations, not the careful, surface-level exchanges we'd settled into over the years. He's learning the business. He asks questions and actually listens to the answers. I think some of what happened in that conference room shook something loose in him, some grip he hadn't known he was in. That's not nothing. That's the part I didn't expect to be grateful for. Pauline told me something when she was here for Thanksgiving. She said, "Mom always said the quietest decision is usually the right one." I'd never heard Loretta say that, but it sounds exactly like her. That's how she operated. Not with grand gestures or declarations, but with steady, patient judgment, applied one careful choice at a time. I'm 68 years old. I still have the lake house, the business, the morning light on the water. I have 2 kids I'm finding my way back to. I have a reading chair in the sunroom I talk to sometimes when the coffee's done, and the house is still. What I know now, more clearly than I ever did before, integrity isn't a dramatic thing. It doesn't stand up in a conference room and make announcements. It just quietly structures the truth so well that when someone finally tries to undo it, there's nothing to undo. Loretta understood that. She lived it every day of our 31 years together. I was lucky enough to be paying attention.